Do you remember those forgotten hillbilly Thanksgiving meals no one makes anymore? The ones that once made the holiday feel whole? These meals shaped rural family tables with simple ingredients and traditions that ran deep. When did dishes that meant so much quietly disappear? Cornbread dressing with sage and cracklings was the sort of Thanksgiving dish that did not need a fancy name to earn respect. It started with day-old cornbread that had dried on the counter, crumbled by hand into a bowl big enough to feed whoever showed up hungry. Sage gave it that sharp holiday smell, the kind that drifted through a house long before the meal was ready, and the cracklings added salty, smoky bits that made every bite feel richer than the ingredients suggested. Rural families made this dressing because it used what they already had. No store-bought bread cubes, no elaborate seasoning blends, just real food stretched with care. Every pan of it tasted slightly different, depending on who made it and how generous they were with the fat. Some families baked it until the edges turned crisp. Others kept it softer so the middle stayed warm and custard like before. Packaged stuffing mixes took over the country. This dressing was the heart of the table, the dish that proved you could make something worthy of a holiday without spending money you did not have. Today it has almost vanished, remembered mostly by those who still know the sound of cracklings popping in a skillet. Kettle-cooked soup beans with ham hock were a Thanksgiving staple long before turkey became something families could count on. The beans simmered low and slow in a blackened pot, soaking up the flavor from the ham hock until the broth turned silky and rich. It was the kind of dish that filled the house with warmth even before the fire was fully roaring, a sign that the holiday had begun. Rural families relied on beans to stretch through cold weather, and having them on Thanksgiving was less about luxury and more about comfort. You could feed a whole crowd with one pot, and nobody walked away hungry. Soup beans were proof that good food did not need expensive ingredients, only time and a patient hand. Once grocery stores made turkey more affordable, dishes like this slowly faded from the holiday spotlight. But for many older families, soup beans were the real taste of Thanksgiving, hearty and honest. Skillet fried corn was the dish that turned simple sweet corn into something unforgettable, especially when cooked in bacon grease. The kernels sizzled and popped as they hit the hot iron, soaking up all the smoky flavor and turning golden around the edges. This was not cream-style corn from a can, and it was definitely not corn baked into a casserole. It was country cooking at its purest, built on the belief that a good skillet could transform anything families served, fried corn beside everything from ham to wild game, and it held its own every time. It was sweet, salty, and rich, the kind of side that made plates a little heavier and bellies a lot happier. Modern kitchens rarely take the time to fry corn this way anymore, but those who grew up on it can still remember the sound of that iron skillet and the smell of bacon drifting through the house. Buttermilk pie with nutmeg was the quiet dessert of rural Thanksgivings, the one that did not look fancy, but always disappeared first. It was made from ingredients that lived permanently in the pantry: flour, sugar, buttermilk, and a dusting of nutmeg that warmed the whole slice. The filling baked up tangy and smooth with a texture somewhere between custard and cream. This pie did not rely on luxury or decoration, only balance and simplicity. When times were tight, it was the sweet treat families trusted because it never failed and never cost more than a few coins. Over the years, as holidays leaned toward richer pies piled high with toppings, this humble beauty faded into memory. But anyone who has tasted its gentle warmth knows it still deserves a place at the table. Fried apples cooked in an iron skillet were a Thanksgiving side that felt more like a warm hug than a dish. The apples softened slowly in butter or bacon grease, sprinkled with sugar and just enough vinegar to give them a gentle tang. They turned glossy and tender, melting into a sweet and sour mixture that tasted like fall in its purest form. Families scooped them over biscuits, served them beside roasted meat, or sometimes ate them straight from the skillet because the smell alone was too tempting to resist. Children waited with forks in hand, knowing the apples had to be eaten while they were still warm and syrupy. The sound of the skillet sizzling was a kind of holiday music, familiar and comforting. It was a dish that required nothing fancy, only patience and an iron skillet seasoned by years of use. As store-bought pies and canned fillings took over, fried apples slipped off the holiday table, but their memory lingers in kitchens where the past still matters, where the sound of a spoon scraping the skillet can bring back decades in a single moment. Potato cakes made from leftover mash were a hillbilly necessity, especially after a long Thanksgiving when not a scrap could be wasted. Cold mashed potatoes were mixed with flour, onions, and sometimes an egg, shaped by hand, and fried until crisp on the outside and soft inside. They stretched leftovers into another meal, making sure no one went hungry the next day, and that nothing from the holiday table went to waste. These cakes were often eaten for breakfast with coffee, or carried out to the barn as a quick bite between chores. Rural households relied on dishes like this because they turned simple ingredients into real comfort, creating warmth from what others might throw away. Potato cakes were proof that thrift and flavor could go hand in hand, that good food did not need to be complicated. Today, they rarely appear on holiday menus, pushed aside by ready-made breakfasts and quick reheats. But their memory still brings warmth to anyone who grew up tasting them right out of the skillet, hot enough to burn your fingers, but too good to wait. Wild game roast was a Thanksgiving reality for many hillbilly families long before store-bought turkey showed up regularly in rural towns. Squirrel, rabbit, and venison were the meats that fed households because they came from the land and required no money, only skill and luck. Each roast carried the flavor of the woods, slow cooked until tender in cast iron pots that never left the stovetop during cold months. Families gathered around the table, knowing exactly who had tracked the animal, who had dressed it, and who had seasoned the pot. There was pride in serving a meal earned through hard work, not purchased in a bright grocery store aisle. It might not have been glamorous, but it was honest food, and families appreciated every bite because it reflected the life they lived. Children grew up learning that a holiday meal was something you earned, not something wrapped in plastic from a grocery store. When turkey eventually became affordable, wild game roasts faded from the table, but they never faded from memory, especially for those who can still taste the smokiness of a meal that came straight from the hills. Corn pone with molasses was one of the simplest Thanksgiving dishes, yet one that carried the most heart. Cornmeal mixed with water and a pinch of salt baked into a dense, rustic loaf that filled bellies without costing a cent. A drizzle of molasses turned it into something close to dessert, sweet and earthy with every bite, especially when the molasses thickened into sticky ribbons on the warm bread. Families ate it slowly, savoring it because it was often the only sweet thing they would taste all week. For families who did not always have sugar or store-bought sweets, this was as close to luxury as a holiday meal could get, a reminder that simplicity could still feel like celebration. It tasted like survival wrapped in warmth, a dish born from necessity but remembered with affection. As times changed, corn pone slipped away, but its spirit still echoes through every homemade cornbread recipe, especially in homes that still honor the old ways. Apple stack cake was the pride of Appalachian gatherings, especially around Thanksgiving. Thin layers of cake were stacked one after another, each separated by spiced stewed apples that soaked into the layers over time. It took patience to make, often shared among several women in a community, because the work was long and the reward worth it, turning the baking into a social ritual as much as a recipe. The apples were cooked down slowly, filling the kitchen with a smell that felt like the whole season condensed into a single pot. By the next day, the cake had softened into something tender, sweet, and deeply nostalgic, the layers almost melting into one another. It was a dessert that brought people together long before store-bought sweets existed, carrying the weight of family stories with every slice. Modern holidays rarely make space for a dessert that takes this much time, but those who remember it know nothing tastes quite the same, and nothing ever will. Brown beans and fried taters were the quiet backbone of many hillbilly Thanksgivings, especially in homes where simple food meant everything. The beans simmered low with salt and maybe a bit of fat, turning creamy as they cooked and filling the kitchen with a gentle, earthy aroma. The potatoes sizzled in a skillet until the edges crisped and browned, popping softly as they hit the hot grease. Together they made a meal that warmed the body and steadied the heart, the kind of food that reminded families what real comfort tasted like. Some households served them as a starter, others as part of the main meal, but in every home they were welcomed with gratitude. Families served them before the main meal or right beside it, grateful for food that filled stomachs without costing much. As Thanksgiving traditions grew richer, brown beans and taters slipped into the background, but their comfort never faded, especially for anyone who still knows the taste of a meal built from patience instead of price. Pinto bean pie was one of those Depression-era desserts that held on in rural kitchens well into the 1960s and 1970s, not because it was fancy, but because it worked. Families who grew up on hard times learned that beans could be more than supper. They could be turned into something sweet with enough sugar, spice, and patience. The filling was mashed until smooth, mixed with cinnamon, nutmeg, and a good splash of vanilla, creating a texture almost identical to pumpkin pie. People who tasted it for the first time often never guessed what it was made from, which was part of its charm. In communities where money was tight and gardens could only provide so much, this pie became a quiet symbol of ingenuity. Mothers served it proudly during Thanksgiving, reminding everyone that a good dessert did not require store-bought cans or expensive ingredients. Over time, as modern recipes took over and people became more distant from the resourceful cooking of prior generations, pinto bean pie faded. But those who remember it know it carried a warmth that came from making the best of what you had, especially around the holidays. Pickled beets and eggs were once a colorful sight on hillbilly Thanksgiving tables, glowing bright pink inside mason jars that sat proudly at the center of the spread. The beets gave everything a sweet earthiness, while the vinegar soaked deep into the eggs, turning them tangy and vibrant. Kids stared at them in fascination, adults reached for them with familiarity, and everyone knew exactly which aunt had brought the jar. This dish existed because nothing in a rural kitchen went to waste, especially at the end of harvest season when beets were plentiful and eggs still needed to be used. People kept jars ready weeks before Thanksgiving so the flavors could deepen, and when the holiday finally arrived, the first slice or spoonful tasted like effort rewarded. As store-bought sides became more common and fewer people kept pickling traditions alive, this once-beloved holiday treat slowly slipped away. But in some homes, a bright jar on the table still brings back memories of holidays filled with color and tang. Homemade Chow relish was a tangy, crunchy topping made from whatever the garden had left at the end of the season: green tomatoes, cabbage, peppers, onions, and anything else that needed saving. In hillbilly homes, Chow was not an optional side. It was the finishing touch that brought beans, meats, and vegetables to life, especially during Thanksgiving when heavy dishes needed a spark of brightness. The whole process felt like a season's farewell, chopping and stewing the vegetables with vinegar, sugar, and spices until the mixture tasted both sweet and sharp. Families stored jars in cool cellars, ready to open during the holidays when fresh vegetables were long gone. Chow was a reminder of the garden's generosity. Even in the colder months over the decades, as supermarkets replaced home gardens, this old relish faded away. But it lives on in stories from those who remember a spoonful on top of a steaming bowl of beans. Turkey neck and back stew was a way for hillbilly families to stretch the bird long before anyone could afford large store-bought turkeys. The necks and backs simmered slowly in broth with onions, potatoes, and carrots until the meat loosened from the bone and the stew thickened into something hearty and filling. This dish was made with gratitude because every part of the bird had a purpose and nothing was wasted. Families gathered around bowls of this stew while the rest of the turkey cooked, sometimes treating it as a Thanksgiving appetizer or, in leaner years, the main event. The flavor was deep and comforting, carrying a richness that came from patience rather than price. Today, most people discard these parts without a second thought, but older generations can still recall the satisfaction of squeezing every last bit of goodness from the holiday bird. Fried okra with a cornmeal crust was the crispy, golden side that completed countless hillbilly Thanksgiving plates. Fresh okra was sliced thin, tossed in seasoned cornmeal, and fried until the edges curled and the centers stayed tender. It made a soft crackle when you bit into it, releasing a flavor that tasted like a summer garden preserved for the holidays. Families served it alongside ham, turkey, or beans, and it always vanished fast. Okra grew well in mountain soil, and frying it became a beloved way to honor the harvest even as winter approached. But as frozen vegetables and packaged sides became easier, fried okra slowly disappeared from the Thanksgiving menu. Those who remember its crunch still think of it as comfort food at its finest. Wild greens with fatback were a staple in mountain communities long before salad bowls and grocery store produce became holiday expectations. Families foraged mustard greens, poke greens, dandelion greens, or whatever the hills offered, washing them carefully before cooking them low and slow with a strip of fatback. The greens wilted into something tender and smoky, their bitterness softened into pure comfort. On Thanksgiving, a big pot of greens balanced out the heavier dishes, reminding everyone of the land that fed them all year. This dish carried the scent of wood smoke, dirt roads, and cold mornings spent gathering from the mountainside. It faded only when foraging did, disappearing as fewer families lived close to the land. But to those who tasted it, wild greens still mean home. Sweet potato biscuits were the kind of holiday bread that felt almost magical, their warm orange glow shining through the soft dough. Made from mashed sweet potatoes mixed with flour, butter, and just enough sugar to hint at sweetness, they came out tender and fragrant every time, with steam rising the moment they were pulled apart. Families served them with syrup, country ham, or simply warm with butter melting into their centers, letting the sweetness of the potato balance the salt of whatever sat beside them. They marked special occasions because sweet potatoes were precious, and turning them into biscuits felt like turning work into celebration, the kind of recipe that required both effort and pride. Children grabbed them hot from the pan, barely waiting for the adults to sit down, knowing the first bite would be soft enough to taste like comfort itself. Over time, ready-made rolls replaced them, and sweet potato biscuits became rare, tucked away in memory rather than on the table. But their memory stays soft and golden in the minds of those who once ate them fresh from the oven, glowing with warmth and family. Molasses glazed country ham was a Thanksgiving centerpiece in homes where turkey was not affordable or not preferred, a dish that carried generations of tradition in every slice. The ham was salted, cured, and pan-fried or baked, then brushed with thick, dark molasses that caramelized into a sweet crust over the smoky meat, creating layers of flavor that came from time rather than cost. The smell alone could fill a house with holiday warmth, drifting into every room long before the meal began. Slices were cut thick and served beside potatoes, greens, or fried apples, creating a plate that felt rich without requiring anything fancy, the kind of feast built from what a family had rather than what they bought. Molasses was the sweetener families trusted when sugar was scarce, and using it on ham made the holiday feel special, a reminder of the harvest and the hard work behind it. As turkey took over American tables, country ham faded from the spotlight, but its tradition remains strong in the hills, where the flavor still carries the weight of memory. Pumpkin cornbread was a practical but delicious twist on a staple that hillbilly families relied on year-round, a quiet celebration of the harvest baked right into the batter. Adding mashed pumpkin to the mix made the cornbread softer, sweeter, and a little more festive for Thanksgiving, giving the bread a warm golden hue that fit perfectly with the season. It was an easy way to stretch ingredients and make use of whatever pumpkins the garden had produced, especially in years when crops were generous. The bread came out golden and fragrant, with a texture that landed somewhere between cornbread and cake, tender enough to eat plain but hearty enough to hold up beside stew or beans. Families ate it with butter, beans, stew, or even molasses drizzled on top, letting it fill the table with warmth. Over time, pumpkin cornbread disappeared as store-bought breads became the norm, but in homes that remember frugal cooking, it still tastes like the holidays, a dish wrapped in memory more than ingredients. Stewed cabbage with bacon grease was the dependable side that showed up on almost every rural Thanksgiving table, not because it was flashy, but because it was steady. The cabbage wilted slowly in a skillet with onions and a spoonful of bacon grease, turning tender, glossy, and savory, the edges browning just enough to add depth. It was simple, but it was filling, and that mattered most for families who needed every dish to do real work on the plate. Families paired it with potatoes, beans, or ham, grateful for a dish that cost little but fed many, especially in years when money was scarce. The smell of cabbage cooking was as familiar as the sound of the front door opening for relatives arriving, a holiday scent that lingered long after supper ended. Today, it rarely appears on holiday spreads, but for many, it remains one of the most comforting flavors of home, tied to a past where nourishment and love were served from the same pan. Sorghum sweet rolls were the kind of Thanksgiving bread that tasted like a blessing pulled straight from the land itself. The dough was soft and tender, kneaded by hand until it felt alive under the palms, then brushed with warm sorghum syrup before baking. Sorghum was a treasure in hill country kitchens, a sweetener made from tall cane that families harvested and pressed themselves, its flavor deeper and earthier than anything store-bought. When the rolls baked, the syrup caramelized on top, turning sticky and golden, filling the house with a smell that felt like autumn settling into the walls. Children hovered near the oven, waiting for the pan to come out, knowing the first roll would still be warm enough to steam in the cool holiday air. These rolls appeared on tables because they were special, but also because they were simple, made from ingredients every family kept on hand. As modern sweeteners took over and sorghum mills closed down, the tradition faded, leaving only memories of rolls so soft they pulled apart in long, sweet strands. Today they linger mostly in stories, reminders of a holiday table built on local harvest and slow, careful hands. Dried apple butter was the kind of spread that took patience, firewood, and a whole day of quiet tending. Families dried slices of apples during the fall, storing them in cloth sacks until Thanksgiving arrived. Then the apples simmered low on the wood stove with sugar and spices until they thickened into a deep, dark paste, rich enough to cling to the spoon. The flavor was concentrated and warm, tasting like every apple of the season squeezed into a single bite. It was spread on biscuits, cornbread, and sweet rolls, turning even the plainest food into something comforting. Making dried apple butter was work, but it was the kind of work families understood. Steady stirring, adding a log to the fire, passing the pot from one set of hands to another as canned spreads filled grocery shelves and wood stoves disappeared from kitchens. Dried apple butter slipped out of everyday life. But nothing store-bought can replace the taste of apples cooked down until they reach the very heart of sweetness. Hoe cakes were the crisp, golden griddle cakes that showed up on Thanksgiving tables long before yeast rolls took over. Made from cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, they sizzled in hot grease until the edges turned lacy and brown. The first one off the pan was always eaten by whoever stood closest, too tempting to wait for the rest. Hoe cakes had a way of soaking up gravy, broth, or syrup, making them versatile enough to sit beside almost any holiday dish. They were quick to make, cheap to prepare, and beloved because they tasted like the cornfields that sustained so many mountain families. As store-bought bread and fancier sides grew popular, hoe cakes were pushed aside, treated like everyday food instead of holiday fare. But for those who remember them, nothing else brings back the taste of a fire-warmed kitchen quite the same way. Vinegar pie was the clever tart dessert families turned to when fruit was scarce and money even scarcer. The filling was made from water, sugar, butter, and a splash of vinegar that mimicked the tang of lemons long before citrus was easy to find in rural towns. When baked, it transformed into a silky, custard-like center with a flavor that surprised anyone tasting it for the first time. This was a pie born from ingenuity, proving that holidays did not require abundance to feel special. Families baked vinegar pie because it offered brightness in seasons when the pantry held more shadows than color. Over time, as store-bought fillings and refrigerated pies became easier to rely on, vinegar pie drifted into obscurity. But those who grew up on it still recall its unexpected sweetness and the pride of making something delicious from almost nothing. Turkey giblet gravy over cornbread was the kind of dish that turned every part of the holiday bird into comfort. The giblets, heart, liver, gizzard, were simmered until tender, chopped fine, and stirred into a broth thickened with flour and pan drippings. The result was a rich, deeply seasoned gravy poured generously over slices of warm cornbread. In homes where wasting food was unthinkable, this dish meant gratitude for every bit of nourishment a bird could offer. Children grew up learning that flavor often lived in the overlooked parts, not just the prized cuts. Over the decades, as packaged gravy mixes and boneless breasts took over, giblet gravy faded. But for older families, nothing tastes more like Thanksgiving than that first ladle dripping over soft cornbread. Green beans cooked with salt pork were the long-simmered backbone of Appalachian holiday tables. The beans boiled low and slow with chunks of salted fat, turning tender and savory with every passing hour until the liquid reduced into something close to a broth and seasoning all in one. The pot would sit on the stove all morning, filling the house with a smell that signaled the holiday had begun long before anything else hit the table. These beans were not crisp or bright. They were soft, seasoned through, and comforting in the way only slow cooking can achieve. The kind of food you felt in your chest. Families paired them with potatoes, cornbread, or meat, knowing they would stretch to feed everyone who arrived, invited or not. The sound of the lid rattling on the pot was as familiar as footsteps on the porch. As quick cook methods and frozen vegetables became the norm, this tradition faded. But for many, the memory of green beans cooked down with salt pork remains a taste of home, a reminder of kitchens warmed by both food and family. Mountain-style dumplings were rolled by hand, not dropped by spoon, and that made them dense, hearty, and perfect for feeding a crowd with very little. The dough was mixed from flour, water, and fat, rolled thin, sliced into strips, and simmered in broth until they swelled into tender ribbons that turned the pot into a meal all by itself. These dumplings absorbed every bit of flavor from the pot, turning simple stock into a feast that felt richer than it had any right to be. On Thanksgiving, they appeared beside roasted meats or inside big simmering pots meant to stretch leftovers, feeding every uncle, cousin, and neighbor who showed up hungry. Making them was a tradition that brought generations together in the kitchen, hands dusted with flour, laughter mixing with the bubbling pot as stories were told for the 100th time. But as boxed mixes and quick meals replaced hand-rolled recipes, these dumplings faded from holiday tables. Those who knew them still swear nothing else fills the belly or heart quite the same, and nothing ever will. Onion and bacon-fried cabbage was one of those rustic sides that smelled so good cooking, you could follow your nose straight into the kitchen before you even knew you were walking. The cabbage wilted down in a skillet full of sizzling bacon grease, mingling with sweet onions until everything turned soft and caramelized around the edges, the kind of browning only patience can buy. It was hearty, inexpensive, and reliable. Everything a good hillbilly dish needed to be. Especially on holidays when stretching ingredients mattered, families served it beside ham, beans, or potatoes, letting its smoky flavor tie the whole meal together in a way only simple food can. It paired just as well with cornbread as it did with the main roast. Though simple, it carried the taste of holidays spent close to the hearth, where warmth came from both the stove and the people gathered around it. Today, fewer people take the time to fry cabbage the slow way, but those who remember it know it brought comfort to the table long before fancier sides arrived. Sweet milk pie was the gentle, custardy dessert older generations relied on whenever they needed something sweet without much fuss or cost. Made from milk, eggs, sugar, and vanilla, it baked into a delicate filling that wobbled softly when sliced. A quiet reminder of how far simple ingredients could go. Its flavor was mild and soothing, tasting like childhood memories and quiet kitchen evenings where the only light came from the oven door opening. Families baked it often because the ingredients were always on hand, especially in homes that kept cows and laid eggs daily, making dessert feel possible even on lean days. On Thanksgiving, Sweet milk pie sat proudly beside richer desserts, offering a simple sweetness that felt like a blessing after a heavy meal. As modern baking grew richer and more complex, this humble pie slipped from view. But in the hearts of those who grew up with it, sweet milk pie still tastes like the holidays, soft and comforting as an old family quilt. Cracklin cornbread was the hearty, savory bread that turned ordinary cornbread into something boldly rustic. The kind of dish people remembered long after the pan-cooled pork cracklings, crispy bits left from rendering fat, were folded into the batter, adding bursts of salty richness to every slice, a reminder that nothing in a hard-working kitchen ever went to waste. The cornbread baked up golden and firm, perfect for sopping gravy or pairing with beans, each bite carrying the taste of the hog that had fed the family through winter. Families prized it because it used every part of the hog, proving once again the creativity behind hillbilly cooking. The cracklings added texture and flavor that felt like a celebration of the year's hard work, a reward for the labor it took to fill smokehouses and pantries. As diets changed and fewer people rendered their own pork, Cracklin cornbread became rare. But those who remember it can still taste the crunch, the salt, and the comfort baked into every bite, a flavor tied to tradition as tightly as any holiday memory. Handwritten recipe cards pulled from a tin box were one of Grandma's most treasured tools, even though she never treated them like anything fragile. The box was old, dented, and faded, but inside lived the entire memory of her kitchen. Each card carried soft edges, smudges of flour, and notes written over years of trial and adjustment. She pulled the box down every Thanksgiving, sorting through the cards quickly until she found the right one. Sometimes she read it carefully. Other times, she just glanced, using it more as a reminder than a guide. Kids loved asking about the cards, and she always let them hold one gently, smiling as they traced the handwriting. Those cards held her patience, her practice, and the wisdom she inherited from cooks before her. No digital recipe could ever replace their warmth or their history. Every dish she made felt touched by that old tin box. Mock pecan pie was the Depression-era dessert that refused to give up sweetness. When real pecans were too expensive, cooks used oats, breadcrumbs, or crushed crackers instead. Mixed with brown sugar and syrup, the filling baked into a chewy, caramel-like layer that mimicked the flavor and texture of the real thing. The crust was often handmade, rolled thin to save flour, but still tender from lard or shortening. For many, it wasn't just a substitute. It was a small act of defiance against scarcity. Families cut into it proudly, knowing they'd turned less into something that felt like enough. Mock pecan pie was the proof that celebration could exist even when times were hard. Though forgotten today, it once symbolized resilience baked golden brown. Caramel apple trifle turned the season's best flavors into a showpiece. Cubes of buttery pound cake were layered with spiced apples, caramel pudding, and whipped cream. Each layer glistened in clear glass bowls, a celebration of color and comfort. It was elegant enough for dinner parties, yet simple enough for home kitchens. The smell alone, cinnamon, brown sugar, butter, drew everyone closer. Every bite was soft and rich, the sweetness deepened by a hint of tart fruit. Families made it for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and every occasion in between. In a decade known for convenience, this dessert managed to feel special without being complicated. It captured the heart of 1970s gatherings, where beauty met practicality and tradition met innovation. Caramel apple trifle reminded everyone that celebration did not need excess, only intention. Served chilled, it tasted like the warmth of a family gathered together, layered, imperfect, and endlessly good. Hominy casserole was golden comfort baked into a dish that smelled like warmth and community. Cooked hominy, soft kernels of corn, was mixed with melted cheese, milk, and butter, then spread into a casserole dish and topped with breadcrumbs for that perfect crunch. When it baked, the top browned beautifully, crisp around the edges, while the inside turned creamy and rich. The scent of butter and corn filled the kitchen, mingling with the smell of coffee, pies, and conversation. It was mild, mellow, and deeply Southern, made for church potlucks, family gatherings, and winter suppers where food meant togetherness. Every scoop held the taste of home, soft and satisfying, with the kind of richness that didn't need dressing up. In the 1950s, dishes like this were passed around on long folding tables under buzzing lights, each one proudly homemade. You could almost hear the laughter echoing off the linoleum floors as plates clinked and stories passed hands. Hominy casserole wasn't fancy, but it didn't have to be. It was food that fed both body and spirit, warm, generous, and impossible to forget. Savory pastries have always been a mark of refined entertaining. While desserts often dominate Valentine's Day, elegant appetizers once played just as important a role. In the mid-20th century, small, handcrafted tarts filled with rich, tangy cheeses were a staple at romantic dinners and cocktail parties alike. They were a way to start a meal with sophistication, bite-sized, decadent, and just enough to whet the appetite. Goat cheese, with its creamy texture and slight tang, was a natural choice. Though commonly associated with French cuisine, it gained popularity in the U.S. during the 1960s, as Americans developed a taste for more artisanal dairy products. Pink peppercorns, often mistaken for true pepper, added a floral heat, while honey balanced the sharpness. The result was a tart that was bold, delicate, and undeniably gourmet. So why aren't these little bites still a Valentine staple? One reason is shifting food trends. By the late 20th century, cheese boards replaced carefully crafted cheese tarts, offering the same flavor profile with less effort. At the same time, home entertaining changed. Fewer people were making intricate appetizers from scratch. German chocolate cake, despite its rich flavor and beloved status, has faced competition from newer, more fashionable desserts that cater to evolving tastes and dietary restrictions. The cake's traditional recipe, which includes a dense, sweet coconut pecan frosting, may not align with current trends toward lighter, less sugary desserts. Additionally, the misconception about its origin, it's American, not German, and the increasing preference for global flavors have also contributed to its reduced prominence in the dessert landscape. Nonetheless, German chocolate cake's decline has not erased its legacy. It remains a nostalgic favorite for many, underscoring the potential for adaptation to today's more health-conscious and flavor-diverse dessert market. Saving turkey drippings for everything was one of those old-fashioned habits Grandma refused to give up, and the truth was that every dish on the table tasted better because of it. After the turkey finished roasting and she transferred it to the carving board, she would tilt the pan and pour every last bit of liquid gold into a jar or small bowl, letting the fat rise to the top. She knew exactly how to use it, spooning the fat into her cast-iron skillet to flavor vegetables, potatoes, or stuffing with that unmistakable richness that no bottled seasoning could ever imitate. The darker juices beneath the fat became the base for her gravy, deepening the flavor in ways only slow-roasted drippings could. She used them to moisten leftover turkey the next day, keeping it tender and soft instead of letting it dry out. She even saved some for future meals, adding a teaspoon here and there to soups or casseroles in the weeks that followed, stretching the flavor of Thanksgiving long after the holiday ended. No part of that turkey went to waste, not while Grandma was in charge. The drippings were her secret ingredient, the hidden thread that tied every dish together. It was one more sign of her resourcefulness, her skill, and her belief that good food should never be thrown away. Using those drippings was not just practical. It was tradition, memory, and pride simmered into every bite. It was one of the many reasons her Thanksgiving tasted perfect every single year. Grape salad with sour cream and brown sugar was the cool, unexpected elegance of a Midwest Thanksgiving. It appeared in the 1950s and 1960s when homemakers began experimenting with recipes that required no baking yet still dazzled at the table. Green and red grapes were washed, dried, and tossed in thick, tangy sour cream. A generous sprinkle of brown sugar melted slowly over the top, forming a delicate caramel-like crust as it chilled in the refrigerator. Sometimes crushed pecans or walnuts were added for a touch of crunch. Served in cut glass bowls, it shimmered like a dessert and tasted like one too. Sweet, tart, and creamy all at once. It was the kind of dish that made guests pause mid-bite, surprised at how something so simple could taste so rich. It brought freshness to a meal often dominated by heaviness, a bright counterpoint to gravy and stuffing. For many, it was the first salad they ever truly loved. It fit perfectly into the era's fascination with sweet, savory blends and convenience cooking, beautiful without effort. Over the decades, it disappeared from most holiday tables, outshined by trendier desserts. Yet for those who remember, one spoonful of grape salad is enough to recall the laughter of long tables, clinking glasses, and the sweet ease of family gathered close. Cherry lemon ribbon cake was sunshine layered in frosting. Bright pink and yellow stripes stacked high, each slice revealing cheerful colors that mirrored the optimism of the decade. The lemon layers were light and tangy, the cherry ones sweet and whimsical. Together, they created a dessert that looked like happiness cut into squares. Whipped frosting covered the top, smooth as satin and often sprinkled with coconut flakes or candied cherries for flair. It was the kind of cake you saw in holiday cookbooks, a showpiece that looked fancier than it was. The secret was in the color. Food dye and imagination turned an ordinary cake mix into a holiday memory. It was baked for birthdays, Christmas dinners, and any occasion worth a little brightness. Each bite carried a taste of citrus and nostalgia, sweetened by the laughter of guests admiring its colors. Cherry lemon ribbon cake was a dessert of joy, lighthearted, eye-catching, and exactly what the 1970s loved most: fun made edible. Applesauce salad was the kind of dish that could only have been born in a mid-century kitchen, where imagination met gelatin and the line between dessert and side dish blurred completely. Applesauce was stirred together with lemon gelatin, sugar, and a touch of cinnamon, then whipped until light enough to catch the air. It poured smooth and glossy into molds shaped like rings, stars, or festive wreaths, ready for the refrigerator's cool embrace. Once firm, it trembled with every touch, shining like glass and smelling faintly of apple pie. Served beside ham or turkey, it added sweetness that balanced the salt of the main meal. The texture melted on the tongue, silky, creamy, and cool. It looked like fun on a plate, the kind of food that made children grin and guests raise an eyebrow. Some topped it with whipped cream, others added chopped nuts for crunch. However it was served, it brought lightness to heavy holiday tables. Applesauce salad was mid-century whimsy at its finest, bright, strange, and full of heart, a small reminder that joy sometimes came in wobbly form. Few flavors are as tied to Valentine's Day as red velvet. It's rich, decadent, and undeniably festive. But its origins go back much further than most people realize. During the early 20th century, cocoa powder was sometimes processed with vinegar to enhance color and texture, creating cakes with a naturally reddish hue. By the 1950s, food coloring took over, turning red velvet into a visual showstopper, perfect for romantic occasions. And what happens when you combine red velvet's signature flavor with another classic, cheesecake? You get a dessert that's as indulgent as it is nostalgic. Swirling tangy cream cheese into fudgy brownies balanced sweetness with a touch of sophistication. Recipes like this became popular in mid-century cookbooks, offering a dessert that felt elegant without requiring the skill of a pastry chef. But as the years went on, dessert trends shifted. By the 2000s, red velvet had gone mainstream, showing up in everything from cupcakes to lattes. Its once special charm got lost in the wave of mass production. And with bakeries offering quick, ready-made options, the art of homemade Valentine's treats started fading. Still, few desserts feel as festive or as shareable. Because if love is all about balance, what better symbol than a brownie that's both rich and tangy? Tunnel of Fudge Cake stood out for its innovative use of a fudgy filling within a cake, capturing the hearts of many during the Pillsbury Bake-Off in 1966. Its decline in popularity can be traced to the evolution of dessert preferences towards lighter, less rich options. Additionally, the complexity of achieving the perfect gooey center without undercooking the rest of the cake presents a challenge for the average home baker, contributing to its waning presence in modern kitchens. As consumers have grown more health-conscious, the dense, calorie-laden nature of the cake further diminishes its appeal. However, the enduring love for chocolate and nostalgia for classic desserts offers an opportunity for Tunnel of Fudge cake to be reinvented with healthier ingredients and simplified preparation techniques. Making her own pie crust was one of the clearest signs that Grandma believed the foundation of a dessert mattered as much as the filling. While others leaned on store-bought shortcuts, she reached for flour, butter, salt, and cold water with the confidence of someone who had done it thousands of times. She pressed, folded, and rolled the dough until it reached that perfect balance between tender and sturdy. She never rushed. She chilled the dough when it needed resting and softened it when it needed warmth, and the result was unmistakable. Her crust flaked in soft layers that melted on the fork, cracking gently under the knife in a sound everyone recognized. People pretended to focus on the filling, but the truth was they came for the crust. It tasted like tradition and skill learned long before anyone else at the table was born. Every pie carried her signature, from the golden sheen to the crimped edge shaped by her fingertips. Store-bought crusts never stood a chance. She never bragged, because to her this was simply the right way to do it. Her pies were unforgettable because she was baked into every slice. Scalloped oysters were the pride of seaside Thanksgivings, a dish layered with memory, comfort, and quiet elegance. Fresh oysters were shucked by hand, their salty liquor saved to moisten the layers of buttered cracker crumbs that surrounded them. Every layer glistened with cream, butter, and a touch of black pepper before being baked until the top turned golden and crisp. The aroma filled the house, rich, briny, and buttery all at once, like a meeting of the ocean and the hearth. In the 1800s and early 1900s, this dish symbolized refinement, served in silver dishes at hotels or in simple casseroles on coastal family tables. Each bite was a harmony of textures, the crunch of crumbs, the softness of oysters, and the silken warmth of cream. Inland families would sometimes make it with canned oysters, preserving the flavor even far from the shore. It was indulgence made accessible, a way for modest homes to taste luxury. Over time, as oysters grew expensive and palates shifted toward lighter fare, scalloped oysters slipped quietly from the holiday menu. Yet its spirit remains in old cookbooks, handwritten in fading ink beside notes like Papa's favorite. For those who remember, it was more than food. It was a celebration of place and tradition, a dish that carried the ocean to the table. Chocolate peppermint roll was the showstopper of every holiday dessert table. A light sponge cake baked flat and rolled with a creamy peppermint filling, it looked like something from a glossy 1970s magazine ad. The swirl inside revealed its story, a perfect balance of rich chocolate and cool mint, made to impress, but easy to love. The aroma filled kitchens with festive warmth, the kind that made people linger just a little longer near the oven. Cooks dusted the top with powdered sugar or drizzled thin ribbons of chocolate glaze for that final elegant touch. It was the dessert that made guests pause before cutting, admiring the spiral as if it were art. Making it was a test of care. The cake had to be rolled while warm, the filling spread with confidence. When sliced, it held its shape beautifully, soft, light, and filled with joy. For homemakers of the 70s, it was proof that creativity and precision could coexist. Served chilled, it was as refreshing as it was decadent. One bite felt like winter wrapped in sweetness, cool, rich, and entirely unforgettable. Potato kugel was heritage baked golden, the smell of it alone enough to draw everyone into the kitchen. Grated potatoes, onion, and eggs came together in a mixture both rustic and perfect, seasoned with little more than salt, pepper, and faith in the oven. When it baked, the edges crisped to deep bronze while the inside stayed soft and tender. The scent was earthy and rich, a reminder of shared meals and passed down recipes. Every household made it a little differently. Some added oil for crunch, others a hint of matzo meal for structure, but all agreed on its heart. Simplicity done with love. Served steaming beside roasts or eaten on its own with applesauce, it was comfort and history bound together. The first bite was always the same. Crisp shell, creamy center, warmth spreading through you like memory itself. Brought to America by Jewish families, it became part of mid-century holiday feasts across backgrounds. Potato kugel was more than a side dish. It was legacy turned into nourishment, humble yet proud, timeless as family itself. Delicate, buttery, and elegantly piped sandwich cookies were once a hallmark of refined baking. In mid-century kitchens, these treats weren't mass-produced. They were carefully crafted, often reserved for special occasions like Valentine's Day. Among the most beloved were Viennese whirls, a nod to the fine pastry traditions of Austria, filled with rich buttercream and fruit preserves. Raspberry and almond have long been a classic pairing. Raspberries, with their vibrant tartness, brought contrast to the sweetness of the cookie, while almonds, associated with love and good fortune for centuries, added depth and aroma. The combination was a real sensory experience, from the crisp bite to the melt-in-your-mouth finish. So why did these elegant cookies disappear from Valentine's tables? Part of the reason was convenience. By the late 20th century, store-bought sandwich cookies became the norm, offering sugary fillings with a longer shelf life but less character. At the same time, home baking shifted towards simpler, larger desserts, pushing labor-intensive piped cookies into the background. Yet, few treats feel as special as something homemade, piped by hand, and filled with care. Because sometimes, love is best expressed in the smallest, most thoughtful details. Originally created for Queen Victoria's Jubilee, Cherries Jubilee brings a royal touch to the table, making its historical significance part of its charm. It can easily be adapted into a non-alcoholic version for family-friendly events, ensuring its universal appeal. Serving it over ice cream is classic, but layering it in parfaits or as a crepe filling adds a creative twist. The flambe technique not only captivates diners with its dramatic presentation, but also enhances the dessert's rich flavors. While traditional recipes feature cherries, variations using different fruits or liquors invite customization. Cherries Jubilee's blend of history, versatility, and theatrical presentation keeps it a beloved classic, offering a special experience for today's diners seeking both tradition and innovation. Setting the table the night before was one of Grandma's most important rituals, something she did not out of necessity but as a way to build anticipation for the holiday. While everyone else was relaxing or half-watching the evening news, she would pull out the special tablecloth that only saw the light of day during Thanksgiving and maybe Christmas. She smoothed it across the table with both hands, pressing out the wrinkles like someone handling something precious. Then she brought out the good plates, the ones with the tiny floral borders or gold rims that were never used for everyday meals. Each plate was placed carefully, every fork and knife aligned with quiet precision. She set out glasses, folded napkins just right, and sometimes added little touches like candles or a small centerpiece she had made earlier in the week. The room always looked softer when she finished, as if it were holding its breath for what was coming. When the rest of the family walked by and saw it, they could feel the holiday already taking shape. It made the house feel different, warmer, almost ceremonial. It reminded everyone that Thanksgiving was not just a meal but a moment in time meant to be honored. Grandma believed presentation mattered, not for show, but because it made people feel valued. By the time morning arrived, the table was waiting, beautiful and ready, and it made the whole day feel anchored in something calm and familiar. Corn pudding was the comfort food that defined rural Thanksgiving tables. Fresh or canned corn mixed with milk, butter, and eggs created a soft, custard-like bake that melted in your mouth. Its sweetness was subtle, its texture soothing. Farmers' families loved it because it stretched easily. Cheap ingredients made rich by care. It smelled of harvest season and family warmth, served steaming beside turkey and greens. Every spoonful carried the golden taste of cornfields and patience. Some versions added a hint of nutmeg, others relied on pure simplicity. Corn pudding wasn't flashy, but it was dependable, a side dish that grounded the feast. As boxed mixes and fast foods took over, this quiet favorite faded away. But those who grew up with it know that no modern casserole can replace its gentle charm. Corn pudding was humble abundance baked to perfection. Cherry snowball cookies looked like little gifts dusted in sugar and surprise. Beneath their powdery white coating hid a secret, a single bright red maraschino cherry glowing in the center. Each bite revealed that pop of color against the pale, buttery dough, a tiny burst of sweetness inside something so simple. They were rolled by hand, baked just long enough to stay soft, then showered in powdered sugar until they looked like winter itself. Children loved them because they felt like magic, and adults loved them because they tasted like home. These cookies were part of the 1970s charm. Festive, easy, and endlessly cheerful. They appeared on every Christmas platter beside fudge squares and candied nuts, and no plate felt complete without them. Making them was almost as fun as eating them, sticky fingers and all. Cherry snowballs weren't extravagant, but they didn't need to be. They were joy wrapped in sweetness, proof that the simplest surprises are sometimes the most beautiful. Celery root mash was the quiet elegance of 1970s holiday dining, where French refinement met American practicality. The rough, knobby root, unassuming and pale, hid a tender heart beneath its coarse skin. Peeled, diced, and simmered until soft, it was mashed with butter, cream, and a touch of salt until it turned smooth and velvety. Its flavor was delicate, a balance between potatoes' richness and celery's brightness, earthy but faintly floral. The first spoonful melted on the tongue, light but satisfying, filling the air with buttery calm. It was served beside roasted duck or beef, bringing refinement without pretense. Magazine spreads of the time praised it as modern, chic, and continental, but beneath its polish lived the same comfort found in any farmhouse mash. Its color was pale ivory, its texture a dream. Every bite felt thoughtful, measured, complete. Celery root mash proved that even the humblest vegetables could become something extraordinary when treated with care, a quiet triumph of simplicity turned sublime. Before filet mignon and lobster took over Valentine's menus, a well-prepared roast was the gold standard for romantic home cooking. It was rustic yet refined, filling the house with warmth and rich aroma. And in the mid-20th century, cooks looking to elevate tradition found a new way to add elegance: honey and lavender. Lavender, long associated with romance and relaxation, has been used in cooking since the Middle Ages. Its floral, slightly citrusy notes paired beautifully with the natural sweetness of honey, creating a glaze that was delicate yet complex. Honey itself has deep romantic symbolism. Once considered an aphrodisiac, it was the namesake of the honeymoon. Together, they turned an ordinary roasted chicken into something worthy of a special occasion. So why did this dish fade from home kitchens? One reason is the changing perception of floral flavors. By the late 20th century, lavender became more associated with soaps and perfumes than with food, making some home cooks hesitant to experiment. At the same time, convenience meals pushed slow-roasted dishes aside in favor of quick, high-heat cooking methods. Ambrosia salad, once a staple of festive gatherings, has seen its popularity wane due to its heavy reliance on canned fruits and marshmallows, clashing with modern dietary preferences that favor fresh, unprocessed ingredients. The advent of more sophisticated desserts and salads, which offer complex flavors and textures without excessive sweetness, also contributed to its decline. Additionally, the visual appeal of ambrosia salad, with its mix of colorful fruits and marshmallows, no longer captivates in an era where aesthetics in food are increasingly valued but demand a more refined presentation. Despite this, ambrosia salad's nostalgic value keeps it in the memories of those who grew up with it, suggesting a possible pathway for reinvention that aligns with contemporary tastes and health considerations. Serving green bean casserole the old way was one of those traditions Grandma never questioned, because she believed there was no sense in changing something that already worked. She made it exactly as she learned it, with canned green beans, that familiar can of cream soup, and the crunchy onions sprinkled on top. Nothing fancy, nothing experimental, nothing added or taken away. She stirred everything together with steady hands, poured it into her old baking dish, and slid it into the oven until the top was golden and bubbling. The smell was unmistakable, drifting through the house like a memory. When she carried it to the table, there was always at least one person who smiled and said it looked exactly the same as last year. That was the point. The comfort came from consistency, from knowing a dish would taste the way it always had. Grandma never chased trends or new versions. She believed the old way was the best way because it held the flavor of every Thanksgiving that came before, and she was right. If any of these forgotten hillbilly dishes stirred up a memory or made you curious to try one, tell me which one in the comments and tap like and subscribe so we can keep bringing old flavors back to life.